Have you ever heard of a place where a name is not a gift, but a burden to be cast aside? A place where loyalty is not just a promise, but the very air you breathe. Let's journey back in time to the rugged, unforgiving mountains of Persia, to a fortress shrouded in legend and fear. Our story begins not with a king or a conqueror, but with a boy from a poor, forgotten village in the dusty plains of Kohest. For him, every sunrise brought the same struggle for survival. But this boy carried a fire in his heart, a yearning for purpose that burned brighter than the midday sun. Whispers of a hidden paradise, a fortress of true believers, reached his village like a desert wind. They spoke of Alamut, the eagle's nest, the seat of the enigmatic leader known as the Old Man of the Mountain. Driven by a faith that was as solid as the mountains themselves, the boy embarked on a perilous journey. He crossed treacherous passes and arid wastes, his gaze fixed on the distant peaks that pierced the clouds. The closer he got, the more Alamut seemed to recede into myth. Its slopes veiled in an eternal, swirling mist. It was a natural defense, a curtain that separated the world of men from the realm of the initiated. And now, before your mind drifts deeper into this peaceful journey, take just a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Because every night, with true stories from the Renaissance, you'll fall asleep calmer, deeper, and more at peace. Finally, after a journey that would have broken lesser spirits, he stood before the gates. But this was not the end of his trial. It was the beginning. Inside Alamut, he was led through corridors carved from living rock, past gardens of impossible beauty and libraries filled with knowledge from across the known world. It was a world of stark contrasts, of profound learning and deadly training, of serene contemplation and lethal purpose. He saw other boys like himself, their eyes holding the same mix of awe, fear, and unwavering resolve. They learned philosophy, astronomy, and mathematics. But they also learned the art of disguise, the silent language of the blade, and 100 ways a life can be ended with a single, precise movement. Their bodies were honed into weapons, their minds sharpened into instruments of unshakable will. The day finally came for him to take the oath. He was brought into a grand hall, the air thick with incense and anticipation. Before him stood the Di, the missionary, the representative of the Hidam Imam on earth. The Dia's eyes seemed to look not at him, but through him, weighing his soul, measuring his commitment. As the first light of dawn painted the mountain peaks in hues of rose and gold, the boy knelt. The Dia's voice was not loud, but it filled the vast chamber, echoing with centuries of devotion. Do you swear your life, your mind, your very soul to the service of the hidden Imam? Do you pledge to become his shadow, his hand in the world of the unbelievers? With a voice trembling but clear, the boy spoke the words that would seal his fate. I swear. In that very moment, the boy from Kohastan ceased to exist. His name, his past, his family all were erased, washed away like footprints in the sand. He was reborn. From that dawn onward, he would be known only by one title, a name that would inspire both terror and reverence throughout the land. His first mission was not a grand assassination of a sultan or a vizier. It was a test, a simple task, yet laden with meaning. He wants to travel to a nearby town and deliver a message, a sealed scroll, to a merchant suspected of betraying their cause. He was given no instructions on what to do if the merchant was guilty, only to observe and return. He descended from Alamut, no longer a boy, but a shadow in human form. The bustling town was a jarring contrast to the disciplined silence of the fortress. People laughed, haggled, and lived their lives completely unaware of the invisible wars being fought in the shadows. He found the merchant's shop, a place filled with exotic silks and spices. The man was plump and jovial, a stark opposite to the lean, hardened figures of Alamut. 4 days, the Fidei watched. He moved through the crowds like a ghost, his training making him all but invisible. He learned the merchant's routines, his habits, his associates. He saw the secret meetings with soldiers of the Seljuk Sultan, the exchange of coin, the whispered promises. The betrayal was real. The Fidei did not act with the sword. That was not his mission. His purpose was to be the eyes and ears of the Imam. He returned to Alamut, his heart a cold, steady stone in his chest. He reported his findings to the D, his voice flat and emotionless, detailing every observation without embellishment. The D listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When the Fidei finished, the master simply nodded. "You have done well. You see, without being seen, you understand that the sharpest weapon is not the dagger, but knowledge." Weeks later, news reached Alamut that the merchant had vanished. No one knew how or why. His business collapsed, and his name was soon forgotten. The Fidei understood a different hand had struck. Guided by the information he had provided, he had been a single, vital link in a long, invisible chain. He felt no pride, no remorse. He felt only the quiet satisfaction of a purpose fulfilled. His next mission came quickly. This time, the target was more significant. A general in the Seljuk army known for his cruelty and his public denouncement of the Nizari Ismailis, the people of Alamut. This would not be a mission of observation. This would require the dagger. The Fidei spent months preparing. He studied the general's fortress, a seemingly impenetrable bastion. He learned the faces and routines of the guards. He adopted a disguise, becoming a humble stonemason's apprentice, his hands calloused and his face smudged with dust. Day by day, he worked on the outer walls of the general's fortress, his mind the map of every stone, every shadow, every blind spot. He learned of a secret banquet the general was holding to celebrate a recent victory. This was his chance. The night of the feast, he used his knowledge of the fortress to scale a wall in a forgotten corner. Silent as the night itself, he moved through the darkened corridors, his every footstep a practiced whisper. He reached the kitchens, a chaotic symphony of heat and noise. Blending in with the servants, he found his opportunity. He carried a platter of roasted pheasant towards the grand hall, his heart the only still point in a swirling world. His target sat at the head of the table, laughing, drunk on wine and arrogance. The Fidei approached the table. For a fleeting second, his eyes met the general's. In that instant, the general saw not a servant, but death itself. Before the man could even cry out, the Fidei's blade, hidden in his sleeve, flashed in the torchlight. The strike was precise, clean, and final. Panic erupted. Guards shouted. Tables overturned. But the Fidei was gone. He did not flee in a mad dash. He simply melted back into the chaos he had created, slipping out of the fortress the same way he came in. He didn't look back. The mission was complete. As he journeyed back to Alamut, he was no hero returning from victory. He was an instrument being returned to its sheath. He had taken a life, not out of anger or hatred, but out of duty. It was a calculated act, a necessary move in the great game played by his masters. He was a Fidei, His will was not his own. His life was a sacrifice. And in the shadow of Alamut, he found his only and absolute purpose. He was a ghost, a myth, a blade in the dark, forever bound by his oath at dawn. In the shifting sands of time, some stories are etched in stone, while others are whispered on the wind, tales of shadows and secrets. Now, we journey back to the 11th century, to the formidable fortress of Alamut, nestled high in the Albores mountains of Persia. This was the heart of the Nizari Ismaili state and the legendary home of the Hashashin, the order of assassins. Our story isn't about their grand leader Hassan Sabbah, nor is it about the famous Marco Polo's fantastical tales of a secret garden of paradise. No, our story follows a ghost, a nameless boy plucked from the dust of a forgotten village. He was Kozan, not for his strength or lineage, but for his emptiness. He was a vessel, ready to be filled with unwavering devotion and deadly purpose. His training was relentless. The world he knew was stripped away, replaced by the stark reality of Alamut's stone walls. He learned the art of silence, to move like a whisper in the wind. He mastered a dozen languages, the customs of 100 cities. His body became a weapon, every muscle honed for a single lethal strike. His mind was forged in the fires of doctrine, taught that their cause was divine, their targets obstacles to a purer world. To die in service was the highest honor. To kill for the order was an act of faith. He was no longer a boy. He was a blade, sharpened and waiting. His first mission was a blur of sweat-soaked palms and a racing heart. The target was a minor official, a man whose name he'd forget as soon as the deed was done. He moved through the city like a phantom, a whisper of death in the crowded marketplace. That night, under the cold gaze of the moon, he stood over the sleeping figure. The dagger felt heavy, alien in his hand. He hesitated, just for a second, a flicker of the boy he once was. But the training kicked in. The blade fell. He slipped away, leaving only a life extinguished and a mystery in his wake. He returned to Alamut, not as a novice, but as a Hashashin. His soul stained with the first of many shadows. For years, he was the order's most trusted instrument. He walked among sultans and viziers, his true identity a perfect mask. He was a merchant in Baghdad, a scholar in Cairo, a poet in Damascus. Each role was a performance, each conversation a calculation. He delivered death with chilling efficiency. His name never spoken, his face never remembered. He was a legend among the shadows, a story told in hushed tones within Alamut's walls. He believed in his cause, in the necessity of his actions. Each life he took, he reasoned, was a sacrifice for a greater good, a world cleansed of corruption. He buried the faces of his victims deep within his mind, silencing their screams with the certainty of his faith. But faith, like stone, can be eroded by the ceaseless drip of doubt. It began subtly, a child's cry in a marketplace that sounded too much like his own forgotten past. The kindness of a stranger who offered him bread, unaware he was sharing a meal with death itself. He saw the grief in the eyes of a widow, the confusion in the face of an orphan. These were not just obstacles. They were people with lives and loves as real as his own. He started to see the world not as a battlefield of good versus evil, but as a tapestry of interconnected lives. And he was the one tearing threads from it. The target was an aging scholar, a man whose only crime was writing words that challenged the order's doctrine. He had spoken of peace, of understanding, of a different path. To Alamut, he was a heretic, a poison that needed to be purged. To our assassin, He was another name on a list. The mission was his final one before earning a place of honor among the masters. He had planned it meticulously. He would pose as a student, gain the old man's trust, and strike when he was most vulnerable. He found the scholar in a sun-drenched courtyard, surrounded by books and fragrant jasmine. The old man's eyes were not filled with malice, but with a gentle wisdom. He welcomed the assassin, offered him tea, and began to speak. He didn't speak of war or power, but of the stars, of poetry, of the shared humanity that binds us all. He spoke of light, not as a distant paradise, but as something found within each person, in acts of kindness and moments of connection. For hours, they talked. The assassin, for the first time in decades, listened not with the ears of a killer, but with the heart of a man. As twilight painted the sky in hues of purple and gold, the moment came. The courtyard was empty. The old man was hunched over a manuscript, his back to him. Our assassin drew his dagger, the familiar weight, a cold comfort in his hand. He moved with the practiced silence of a lifetime. He stood over the scholar, the blade poised to strike, to complete his final mission and secure his legacy. And then, he stopped. The scholar's words echoed in his mind. Every soul is a universe, he had said. To extinguish one is to extinguish a cosmos. That moment he saw not a target, but a man. He saw the cosmos within him, the years of wisdom, the love for knowledge, the gentle spirit. He looked at the dagger in his hand, a tool of darkness, and then at the fading light in the sky. He had a choice, not between obedience and treason, but between shadow and light. In sparing the old man, he killed the assassin he had been for so long. He lowered the dagger. The scholar, sensing the shift in the air, turned. He saw the weapon, the conflict in the young man's eyes, and he simply smiled, a look of profound understanding. Without a word, the assassin turned and walked away, leaving the dagger behind, a relic of a life he was shedding. He dissolved back into the night. But this Jimmy, he wasn't a phantom returning to his fortress. He was a man walking towards an unknown dawn, free for the first time. His name was never recorded in the annals of the Hashashin. In Alamut, he was likely branded a traitor, his existence erased. Yet, his true legacy isn't one of silent death, but of a silent, profound choice. It's the story of a man who stood at the precipice of darkness and chose to step into the light, a whisper of defiance in the long history of shadows. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the past. If you were captivated by this story of choice and redemption, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales hidden in the footnotes of history. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, keep seeking the stories that lie in the shadows end. Now, let the fire take you into a world of calm and dreams. In the shifting sands of Persia, where empires rise and fall like dunes in the wind, a new power was stirring. Not a kingdom of vast armies or gleaming cities, but one of shadows, whispers, and a single, unyielding will. This was the age of the assassins, and their fortress, Alamut, the eagle's nest, was the heart from which their influence bled across the known world. Now, we journey back to the 11th century to walk the cold stone halls of Alamut and witness the forging of its most legendary weapon, the Hashashin. Our story begins not with a king or a general, but with a boy. We'll call him Malik. Plucked from a life of obscurity, perhaps a village raided by Turks, or a family left destitute by endless war. He arrives at the gates of Alamut as a prisoner, but as a neophyte, a blank slate upon which a new identity will be etched. The air here is thin, sharp with the chill of the Alborz mountains. The fortress itself seems carved from the very peak It sits upon a jagged crown of stone against the sky, seemingly impregnable. This isn't just a castle, it's a crucible. For Malik, the old world is gone. His name, his family, his past, they are feathers scattered on the wind. Inside Alamut, he is given a new purpose. The training begins not with a dagger, but with a book. The library of Alamut was legendary, a repository of knowledge rivaling any in the Islamic world. Here, under the tutelage of the Dees, the missionaries and teachers of the Nizari Ismaili faith, Malik learns. He studies not just the Quran, but mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, and logic. The fortress is a university as much as a barracks. Hassan Sabbah, the enigmatic founder and leader, the old man of the mountain, understood that the sharpest weapon is the mind. His followers were not mindless killers. They were scholars, thinkers, and theologians. They were taught to question, to debate, to understand the intricate political and religious tapestry of the world. They were destined to change. A core tenet was drilled into them. Nothing is true. Everything is permitted. This wasn't a license for chaos, but a profound philosophical challenge to accepted norms. A tool to deconstruct the authority of their enemies and justify their own revolutionary cause. Alongside intellectual pursuits, the physical training is relentless. The slopes of Alamut are their training ground. They learn to move like ghosts, to climb sheer rock faces with nothing but their bare hands and feet, to become one with the shadows. They master acrobatics, not for show, but for navigating the rooftops of fortified cities. Every muscle is honed, every sinew strengthened, until their bodies are as disciplined and resilient as their minds. They learn to endure pain, hunger, and cold, stripping away every weakness until only purpose remains. The art of disguise is paramount. An assassin had to be anyone and no one. One day, Malik might be a Sufi mystic, his face lost in contemplation. The next, a bustling merchant in the crowded marketplace of Baghdad, his voice haggling over the price of silks. Then, a humbled servant in a Seljuk vizier's court, invisible and overlooked. They learned languages, dialects, customs, and etiquettes, allowing them to infiltrate any layer of society, to become a trusted part of the very structure they intended to dismantle. Their ability to blend in was their greatest shield. And then there is the art of killing. It is taught not with frenzied brutality, but with the cold precision of a surgeon. The preferred weapon is the dagger, intimate and silent. They study human anatomy, learning the quickest, most efficient ways to end the life. But unlike other warriors, their goal was not to engage in open combat. The Hashashin strike was a public spectacle, a political statement delivered at the point of a blade. They often struck in crowded places, a mosque, a court, a market, not to escape, but to make their presence known. They rarely tried to flee, their survival secondary to the mission's success and the terror it would inspire. This acceptance of death was their most terrifying quality. Within the walls of Alamut, a powerful bond is forged. These trainees, the fida, or self-sacrificers, are a brotherhood. They eat together, study together, and train together. They are bound by a shared faith and a devotion to their leader that is absolute. They are taught that their actions serve a higher purpose, to protect their community from persecution and to strike down the corrupt and tyrannical leaders who threaten them. They believe they are the righteous hand of justice in an unjust world. To them, Alamut is not a prison, but a sanctuary, the only place of true order in a world of chaos. Rumors and legends swirled around Alamut, tales spun by their enemies to demonize them. Stories of secret gardens of paradise where trainees were drugged with hashish and given a glimpse of the afterlife to ensure their loyalty. While modern historians largely dismiss these tales as propaganda, they highlight the fear and mystique the assassins cultivated. Their power wasn't just in the dagger, but in the stories told about them. They mastered psychological warfare, their reputation often achieving more than any single assassination could after years of this intense indoctrination. Malik is no longer the boy who arrived at the gates. He is a living weapon. His mind is a fortress of logic and faith. His body is a tool of silent grace and deadly force. He has no fear of death, only a singular focus on the mission. One day, he is summoned before the D. He is given a target, a powerful vizier, a cruel governor, a general whose armies threaten their people. He is given a name, a city, and a single instruction. Now, he prepares to leave the eagle's nest for the first time in years. As he descends the mountain, he melts back into the world he once left behind, but he is no longer a part of it. He is a shadow cast by Alamut, a ghost walking among the living. He is an instrument of a will forged in silence and stone. His mission is not just to kill a man, but to send a message that no one, no matter how powerful, is beyond their reach. The legend of the Hashashin is about to be written in blood, and Malik is its scribe. The story of the Hashashin is a potent reminder of how a small, dedicated group can challenge the mightiest of empires. Their methods were brutal, but their existence was a testament to the power of belief, discipline, and unwavering will. They were more than just assassins. They were a force of history, born in the shadow of the winds whispered tales of sand and steel across the sun-scorched peaks of the Elburz Mountains. Here, nestled in the heart of Persia, stood Alamut, the eagle's nest, a fortress that was more myth than stone. I was born in its shadow, raised not on a mother's milk, but on the unwavering creed of the Hashashin. We were the Fadayin, the self-sacrificing ones, instruments of a will far greater than our own. Our master, the old man of the mountain, taught us that nothing is true and everything is permitted. We were the hidden daggers in the heart of a corrupt world, the silent arbiters of justice. My name is Kasra. For years, I trained. The blade was an extension of my arm, the crowd a forest to melt into, and poison a silent promise on my lips. I learned languages, mastered disguise, and studied the intricate dance of politics and power that choked the great cities of the Seljuk Empire. My body was a weapon, my mind a fortress, and my heart a void, filled only with devotion to our Imam and his sacred cause. I yearned for the day I would prove my worth, the day my training would be put to the test. That day came sooner than I expected. The old man of the mountain summoned me to his chambers, a room that smelled of ancient parchment and frankincense. His eyes, deep and knowing, held the wisdom of 1,000 lifetimes. He spoke of Baghdad, the jewel of the world, now a den of vipers. He told me of Vizier Nizam al-Mulk, a man whose ambition was a shadow stretching across the caliphate, a man who plotted in the dark against our Imam. The vizier was a cancer, and I was to be the cure. He conspires against the light, the master said, his voice a low hum that resonated within my very bones. He sows discord and strengthens the hand of our enemies. You will go to Baghdad, you will become one of them. And when the time is right, you will remove this thorn from the side of the faithful. His words were not a command. They were a holy decree. There was no room for doubt, no space for fear. This was my purpose, the reason for my existence. In the dying eyes of your target, you will see the dawn of a new era. And so my journey began. I left the stark beauty of Alamut behind, trading the mountain winds for the dusty roads leading to the heart of the empire. I carried with me only a few coins, a sharpened mind, and a singular, unshakable objective. I was no longer Kasara, the Fedayeen of Alamut. I was now Ibn Khalid, a humble scribe from Nishapur, seeking his fortune in the sprawling metropolis of Baghdad. Baghdad, it was a cacophony of life, a riot of colors, sounds, and smells. The scent of spices and perfumes mingled with the stench of the crowded streets. Merchants hawked their wares, scholars debated in shaded courtyards, and the call to prayer echoed from 100 minarets. It was a city of poets and thieves, of saints and sinners. For a boy who had known only the disciplined austerity of Alamut, it was overwhelming. But I was not a boy. I was a weapon, and I had to find my place. I found a small room in a cramped caravanserai near the Grand Bazaar. From there, I began to weave my new identity. I found work transcribing texts for a wealthy merchant, my hand steady, my calligraphy flawless, a skill honed for years. Not for art, but for this very purpose. I spent my days in the libraries and markets, listening, observing. I learned the rhythms of the city, the ebb and flow of its people, the whispers of dissent, and the murmurs of conspiracy that flowed beneath the surface like the Tigris River itself. I lived as Ibn Khalid for months. I ate the city's food, wore its clothes, and prayed in its mosques. I learned the names of the vizier's guards, the routines of his household, the faces of his allies and enemies. I became a ghost in plain sight, a man so ordinary that he was invisible. The part of me that was Kasra, the assassin, lay dormant, waiting. But sometimes, in the quiet of the night, as the city slept, he would stir. I would trace the lines of the hidden blade strapped to my forearm, its cold steel a familiar comfort, a reminder of my true self and my sacred duty. The Vizier, Nizam al-Mulk, was everything I had been told. He was powerful, cunning, and beloved by many who saw him as a pillar of the empire. He was also arrogant, his every public appearance a display of wealth and influence. He moved through the city in a cocoon of guards, a fortress of flesh and steel. Getting to him would not be easy. It would require patience, precision, and a perfect opportunity. That opportunity finally presented itself. It was announced that the vizier would attend Friday prayers at the great mosque, a grand gesture of piety meant to endear him further to the populace. The crowds would be immense, the security tight, but in chaos, there is always a path for those who know how to find it. This was the moment I had been preparing for, the culmination of my life's training. The morning of the sermon, I performed my ablutions, not just as a scribe, but as a Fedian preparing to meet his destiny. I dressed in simple robes, my face lost in the sea of thousands who flocked to the mosque. The air was thick with anticipation and incense. I moved through the crowd with the practiced ease of a phantom, my heart a steady drum against my ribs. I was not nervous. I was alive. I was purpose personified. I positioned myself along the path I knew the vizier would take as he exited the main prayer hall. The sermon ended, and the massive congregation began to disperse. The energy of the crowd was a current, and I let it carry me, inching ever closer to my target. Then I saw him, Nizam al-Mulk, surrounded by his turbaned guards, his face serene, basking in the adulation of the people. He was just a man of flesh and blood. Time seemed too slow. The roar of the crowd faded to a distant hum. I saw the gap, a momentary lapse in the guard's formation as one turned to acknowledge a greeting. It was an opening no wider than a breath, lasting no longer than a heartbeat, but it was enough. I surged forward. A guard shouted, but it was too late. I was already past him. I drew the blade from my sleeve, its edge gleaming for a fraction of a second in the sunlight filtering through the courtyard arches. The vizier turned, his eyes widening in surprise, then confusion. There was no fear. Not yet. My blade found its home, sinking deep into the space between his ribs. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. For a moment we were locked in a strange, intimate embrace. His body went rigid, and he looked down at the hilt of the dagger protruding from his chest, then back up at me. His guards were upon me now, their swords drawn, but for that one eternal second, it was just the two of us. And in that second, something happened that I was not prepared for. The old man of the mountain had told me I would see the dawn of a new era in my victimess, but as I looked into the dying eyes of Nizam al-Mulk, I saw no evil, no tyranny, no grand conspiracy. I saw only surprise, and then a profound, questioning sorrow. His lips moved, but no sound came out. It was a look that did not scream monster. But why? In that moment, in the eyes of the man I had just slain, a crack appeared in the fortress of my conviction. For the first time in my life, a seed of doubt was planted in the barren soil of my heart. The guards dragged me away, the crowd screaming in chaos around me. I did not resist. My mission was complete. I was Kasra, the Fedein, the instrument of a holy will. But as they pulled me through the blood-soaked courtyard, one question, reflected from the vizier's dying gaze, echoed in the sudden, terrifying silence of my mind. Was it truly justice I had delivered, or had I just become another shadow in a world already lost to darkness? My first mission was a success, but it was also the beginning of my true trial. In the towering, jagged peaks of the Alborz Mountains, a fortress clings to the rock like an eagle's nest. This is Alamut, the heart of a new order. A place whispered about in fearful tones across the Seljuk Empire. It is the year 485 of the Hijra, and I am one of its devoted sons. My name is Yusuf, and I am a Fidoi, one of the We are known to our enemies by another name, a name spat with a mixture of terror and revulsion. Our master, Hassan Sabbah, the old man of the mountain, has shown us a truth deeper than the valleys below. He has taught us that the true paradise is not a distant promise, but a state of enlightened devotion, a commitment to a cause far greater than any single life. Here, within these stone walls, we are forged into instruments of a divine will, our bodies honed into weapons, our minds sharpened by knowledge and unwavering faith. We are not the mindless killers our enemies portray us to be. We are scholars, theologians, and warriors, each of us a link in a chain that will reshape the world. My training was relentless. From dawn until the stars claimed the sky, we practiced with the dagger, the sword, and the bow. We learned to move like shadows, to become ghosts in crowded bazaars, to blend into the very fabric of the cities we would one day visit as arbiters of fate. We studied languages, cultures, and the intricate politics of the courts we were meant to infiltrate. But more than anything, we studied the nature of fear. We learned that it is a tool, a weapon more potent than any blade. To master it in others, we first had to conquer it within ourselves. We were taught that our missions were not acts of murder, but of political and spiritual necessity. The Seljuk sultans and their viziers had corrupted the faith, their power built on tyranny and decadence. They were a cancer upon the body of Islam, and we were the surgeon's scalpel. Each target was chosen with meticulous care by our master. Each mission was a message, written not in ink, but in the blood of the powerful. It was a declaration that no tyrant, no matter how high his throne, was beyond the reach of justice. Then the day came when my name was called. I was summoned before Hassan Sabbah himself. His eyes, deep and piercing, seemed to look straight into my soul. He spoke not of glory, but of duty, not of reward, but of sacrifice. My target was a name that made even the bravest commanders tremble: Nizam Alamut, the Grand Vizier of the Seljuk Empire, the true power behind the Sultan's throne. He was the architect of our persecution, the mind behind the armies sent to crush us. To strike him down would be to strike at the very heart of the empire. My preparations were intense. I was to disguise myself as a Sufi mystic, a wandering dervish. For weeks, I lived apart. I let my beard grow unruly, wore the simple woolen robes, and carried a beggar's bowl. I memorized the Sufi poems and prayers, my voice learning the cadence of their holy men. I journeyed from Alamut, melting into the caravans that snaked across the Persian landscape. I was no longer Yusuf the Fit. I was a humble seeker of truth, my true purpose hidden beneath a veneer of piety. My journey took me to the city of Nahavand, where the vizier's court was temporarily encamped. The city buzzed with the presence of the great man. Soldiers were everywhere, their polished armor glinting in the sun. Spies and informants lurked in every tea house, their ears opened for any hint of conspiracy. To get close to Nizam al-Mulk was considered impossible. His personal guard was a legion, and his paranoia was legendary. But our master had taught us that every fortress has a weakness, and the greatest weakness of the powerful is their arrogance. I spent days observing, learning the routines of the camp. I begged for alms, near the vizier's grand tent, my eyes downcast, but my senses alert. I listened to the gossip of servants and the boasts of soldiers. I learned that Nizam al-Mulk, despite his public piety, had a private weakness. He enjoyed the company of learned and spiritual men. He saw himself as a patron of knowledge and religion, and he would often grant audiences to traveling scholars and mystics, eager to debate and display his own wisdom. This was my opening. This was the crack in his armor. On the 10th day of Ramadan, as the sun began to set, Nizam al-Mulk was being carried from his audience tent to his private quarters in a litter, a covered couch borne on the shoulders of his servants. The evening call to prayer had just begun, its mournful cry hanging in the air. The guards were relaxed, their minds on breaking their fast. I joined a small crowd of petitioners and supplicants who rushed forward, hoping for a final word or a piece of charity from the great vizier. I pushed my way to the front, holding my petition scroll high. A word for the great vizier, I cried, my voice filled with the feigned desperation of a true petition. The guards tried to push me back, but in the confusion of the crowd, I slipped through their line. I was just feet from the litter, the curtains were parted, and I saw him, Nizam al-Mulk, an old man, his face lined with the cares of an empire, his beard white and venerable. For a fleeting second, our eyes met. In his, I saw surprise, then annoyance. In mine, he saw only the calm reflection of his own doom. In one fluid motion, the petition scroll fell from my hand, and the dagger, hidden in my sleeve, was in my grasp. The world seemed to slow down. The shouts of the guards, the gasps of the crowd, all faded into a distant hum. There was only the target, the mission, the purpose. I lunged forward. The blade was an extension of my will, a physical manifestation of Alamut's judgment. It found its home in the vizier's chest. There was a moment of shocked silence, a frozen tableau. Then chaos erupted. The vizier slumped, a dark stain spreading across his fine robes. His guards, their faces contorted with rage and disbelief, fell upon me. I did not resist. My part was played. As their swords and spears pierced my body, a strange sense of peace washed over me. I had not failed. I had delivered the message. That night, my story was carried on the wind back to Alamut. It was told in hushed, reverent tones. The Fidai who had slain the mighty Nizam my death was not an end, but a beginning. It became a lesson, a sacred hymn sung to the new recruits. In the shadow of Alamut, they learned what I had learned in that final, bloody moment. They learned that on this path, sacrifice is the ultimate expression of faith, and blood, our blood and the blood of tyrants, is the true language of belief. My mission was complete. I was home. The year is 1176. The world is a crucible of faith and steel, where empires clash under the banners of God and Allah. I am Korim, a blade in the shadow, a whisper in the wind. They call us the Hashashin, the order of assassins. My life is one of devotion, not to a deity in the heavens, but to a cause on this earth, forged in the mountain fortress of Alamut. From those formidable peaks, our master, the old man of the mountain, has given me a new mission, my destination, the heart of Crusader territory in Syria. My target, a man known as Count Renaud de Chatillon, a Crusader commander whose ruthlessness is a legend whispered in both fear and awe. Our journey from Persia to the Levant was a pilgrimage of ghosts. We moved through deserts that swallowed the sun and across mountains that scraped the sky, our identities shifting like sand dunes. One day I was a merchant trading silks, the next a scholar poring over ancient texts. We are chameleons, masters of deception. Our greatest weapon isn't the dagger hidden in our sleeve, but the mind that wields it. We learn languages, customs, and the subtle inflections of a lie. To be an assassin is to be everyone and no one at all. In the bustling markets of Aleppo, we gathered intelligence whispers of troop movements, caravan routes, and the weaknesses of the men we were sent to judge. The stronghold of Masyaf, our Syrian bastion, rose from the rock like a promise of stone and shadow. Here, the final preparations were made. My new identity was chosen with meticulous care, Brother Thomas, a humble Franciscan monk seeking to minister to the soldiers of Christ. The robes felt strange against my skin, a coarse wool that smelled of piety and dust. I practiced the gestures, the prayers, the downward cast of my eyes. I memorized psalms and hymns, their melodies alien to my tongue, which was more accustomed to the verses of the Quran. My dagger, my trusted companion, was concealed within a hollowed-out Bible, its cold steel resting against holy words. It was the ultimate blasphemy, the perfect disguise. My journey to Reno's fortress was a study in contrasts. I traveled with a group of genuine pilgrims, their faces etched with a profound, unwavering faith. They sang hymns as we walked, their voices rising in the hot Syrian air. They spoke of miracles and salvation, their eyes fixed on a distant Jerusalem. I listened, nodded, and played my part, the quiet monk with a solemn heart. I felt a strange kinship with them. Their devotion was a mirror of my own, just reflecting a different light. We all walked a path of sacrifice, believing our cause was just, our reward eternal. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. The Crusader fortress was a monstrous beast of rock and mortars, its banners snapping defiantly in the wind. The lion and the cross flew high, symbols of a power that had carved its name into this ancient land with blood and diarna. As Brother Thomas, I was welcomed with a surprising warmth. A monk was a comfort, a piece of home in this foreign, hostile land. The soldiers, rough men with calloused hands and haunted eyes, would stop me to ask for a blessing. They spoke of their families in France, of the fields they had left behind, of their fears of death and their hopes for glory. They were not the demons of our stories. They were just men, far from home, clinging to their faith as a drowning man clings to a piece of driftwood. I observed my target from the periphery. Renaud de Chatillon was not the caricature of evil I had imagined. He was a bull of a man with a booming laugh and eyes that missed nothing. He was brutal in his tactics, yes, but he was also a charismatic leader. His men didn't just fear him, they revered him. I watched him spar in the training yard, his movements surprisingly graceful for a man his size. I saw him share a joke with a common foot soldier, a moment of unguarded humanity. The monster was becoming a man, and this complicated everything. The clear lines of my mission, once drawn in the stark black and white of duty, were beginning to blur into shades of gray. Days turned into a week. My routine became a rhythm of prayer and observation. I learned the layout of the castle, the changing of the guards, the moments when Renaud was most vulnerable. The perfect opportunity would be during his private evening prayers in the Casa Chapula time when he was alone, unarmored, and seeking solace from his God. My mind, the disciplined tool of an assassin, planned every step, every breath, every heartbeat of the final act. But my own heart, an organ I had long suppressed, was growing heavier with each passing day. The soldier who confessed his terror before a battle, the young squire who missed his mother, their faces haunted my thoughts. Were their lives forfeit for the sins of their leader? The designated night arrived, cloaked in a new moon's darkness. The castle was quiet, the air thick with anticipation. I moved through the stone corridors, a wraith in monk's robes. The chapel was lit by a constellation of flickering candles. Renaud was there, kneeling before a large, ornate crucifix. His back was to me. His head was bowed, his great shoulders slumped not with the weight of his armor, but with something far heavier. He was praying, his voice a low, guttural murmur. This was the moment, the culmination of my training, my journey, my entire existence. My hand went to the hollowed book, my fingers brushing against the cold hilt of my dagger. As I crept closer, his prayer became clearer. He wasn't asking for victory or glory. He was speaking of his wife, of his children. He was asking for forgiveness, for his doubts, for the violent path he had chosen. His voice was raw with a pain I knew intimately, the pain of a man convinced he is serving a higher purpose, yet haunted by the human cost. He was a mirror. My own doubts, my own sacrifices, my own buried grief for the life I could never have, stared back at me from his kneeling form. He must have sensed my presence. He didn't turn, but his prayer faltered. In that heart-stopping silence, I made a decision. It was not a conscious thought, but an impulse from a place deeper than duty. I stepped forward, not as an assassin, but as the monk I was pretending to be. My hand, the one meant to draw the blade, reached out and gently touched the wooden cross he was facing. It was smooth, worn by the touch of countless desperate hands. Renaud flinched, his hand immediately flying to the sword at his side. He turned, his eyes wide with alarm, and saw me, Brother Thomas, the harmless monk. His expression shifted from shock to confusion, then to a flicker of something else, gratitude. Perhaps he saw not a threat, but a fellow man of faith, offering comfort in a moment of vulnerability. "Forgive me, my lord," I whispered, my voice steady despite the tempest in my soul. "I did not mean to intrude on your prayers. I was merely drawn to... ... My fingers lingered on the cross. For an instant, standing there in the candlelight, the chasm between us disappeared. He was not the Crusader devil, and I was not the Hashashin phantom. We were just two men on opposite sides of a blade, both bearing the weight of our convictions. We were both prisoners of the same war, praying two different names for the same peace, the same absolution. The cross I touched was not just a symbol of his faith, but a testament to the shared agony of our humanity. I left the chapel without a word, my mission a failure. Or was it? I had been sent to eliminate a man, but instead, I had confronted a truth more profound than any order from Alamut. The line between good and evil, between saint and sinner, is not a wall of stone, but a thread of smoke. In the shadow of the fortress, I understood that faith on both sides of the conflict carries the exact same burden of pain and the same desperate hope for redemption. My journey back to Masyaf would be one of heavy contemplation. I had failed my master, but perhaps for the first time I had not failed myself. The blade remained in its sheath, but my soul had been struck, and the wound was one of understanding. And in this brutal, unforgiving world, perhaps that was a victory of its own. In the sun-scorched lands of Persia, where empires rise and fall like dunes in the desert wind, a legend was born. Not of kings or conquerors, but of shadows. They were the Hashashin, the order of assassins, and their fortress, Alamut, was a name whispered in fear from the Crusader castles of the Levant to the grand courts of the Seljuk Empire. This is the story of one such shadow, a Fidao named Javad, and his mission in the heart of enemy territory. Our story begins not in the remote, impregnable fortress of Alamut, but in the bustling, opulent city of East, the jewel of the Seljuk Sultanate. Imagine the vibrant markets, the scent of spices and perfumes mingling in the air, the kaleidoscope of colors from silks and carpets, and the constant murmur of 1,000 voices haggling, gossiping, and plotting. It is a city of life, but also a city of secrets, where a dagger can be hidden just as easily as a coin. Javad was no stranger to daggers, but here in Isfahan, his primary weapons were different. He was not a warrior storming a castle wall. He was a whisper in a crowded room, a ghost in the palace corridors. His target was a powerful Seljuk emir, a man whose influence was a thorn in the side of the Hashashin's mysterious Grand Master, the Old Man of the Mountain. To get to this emir, Javad couldn't rely on brute force. He had to become one of them. He adopted the guise of a humble merchant, trading in rare manuscripts. This persona gave him access to the city's intellectual and political circles. He spent his days in libraries and tea houses, his ears open, his tongue careful. He learned that in the sophisticated world of the Seljuk court, power was a complex dance of alliances, favors, and betrayals. A well-placed word could be sharper than any blade. His training at Alamut had prepared him for this. He was taught not just the art of killing, but the art of deception, of patience, of becoming invisible in plain sight. Javad observed his target for weeks, learning his habits, his routines, his friends, and his enemies. The emir was a man surrounded by luxury and guards, seemingly untouchable. He was known for his piety and his generosity. But Javad knew that appearances in this city were a carefully constructed facade. Every polite smile could hide a scheme, every courteous bow a potential threat. He had to navigate this labyrinth of etiquette and intrigue, where a single misstep could mean a swift and silent end. His opportunity came during a grand feast at the Emir's palace. Javad, having cultivated a reputation as a learned and charming merchant, secured an invitation. The hall was a spectacle of wealth golden plates, flowing wine, and the most influential figures of Isfahan gathered under one roof. The air was thick with music, laughter, and the subtle currents of political maneuvering. For Javad, it was a hunting ground. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, exchanging pleasantries, offering scholarly opinions, and making himself utterly unremarkable. He was a master of civility. He knew that the deadliest predators are often the ones that put their prey at ease. As he got closer to the emir, he saw the man holding court, surrounded by sycophants and petitioners. He was charismatic, powerful, and utterly unaware of the shadow that was slowly closing in. Javad had learned of a secret passage, a servant's corridor that ran behind the main hall's tapestry. It was a route known only to a few, a detail he had extracted from a disgruntled servant through a carefully orchestrated conversation weeks earlier. Patience, the first virtue of the fidai, was about to be rewarded. While the feast was at its peak, he slipped away, his heart a steady drum against his ribs. The Hashashin were taught to control their fear, to turn it into a cold, sharp focus. He found the emir in a private study, away from the noise, reviewing a document. The guards were outside, confident in the security of the palace. For a moment, there was silence, the hunter and the prey alone. The emir looked up, surprised but not alarmed. He recognized the merchant from the feast. He offered a polite smile, the very kind Javad had come to understand so well. "Can I help you, my friend?" the emir asked, his voice smooth and welcoming. In that moment, Javad saw the truth of the court. The emir's smile was a mask, just like his own. The world of politics was a battlefield where assassinations were simply another move in the game. But the Hashashin's purpose was different. They saw themselves not as mere killers, but as instruments of a higher will, shaping history from the shadows, striking down the corrupt and the tyrannical to bring about a more just world. The deed was done swiftly, silently, an act of violence that was as precise and dispassionate as a surgeon's cut. Javad was gone before the body was discovered, melting back into the chaos of the feast, and then into the labyrinthine streets of Israel. He left behind a city that would soon be thrown into turmoil, a court that would be consumed by suspicion, and a vacant seat of power that others would rush to fill. As Javad made his way back towards the rugged mountains that sheltered Alamut, he reflected on his mission. He had succeeded, but the experience had changed him. He had learned that the most dangerous weapon in a city of power is not the dagger, but the polite smile. He understood that in the grand game of empires, the lines between friend and foe, good on evil, were as shifting as the desert sands. The mission was over, but the shadow remained. Javad's story is just one of thousands from the annals of the Hashashin. They were a force that terrified kings and sultans for centuries, a testament to the power of belief, discipline, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for a cause. Their legend lives on, a chilling reminder that even in the most glittering courts, a shadow can fall, and a polite smile can be the last thing you ever see. The air over Alamut hangs thick tonight, heavy with the scent of smoke and the metallic tamps of fear. It's a night painted in shades of orange and black, where the fortress walls once symbols of unyielding strength, now look like the jagged teeth of a dying beast silhouetted against a sky choked with fire. Down in the courtyards, the fountains that once sang with the clear voice of mountain springs now gurgle a green, crimson tune. This isn't the Alamut of my training, the sanctuary of faith. This is a crucible, and we are the metal being forged in its heart. We move through the chaos, the Fedayeen, my brothers and I. We are not soldiers in the way the invaders understand. We are phantoms, whispers in the clamor of battle. Our footsteps are lost in the crackle of flames, our dark robes merging with the deep shadows cast by the burning ramparts. Each of us is an echo, a manifestation of a will greater than our own, a living testament to the Master's vision. We flow between the columns of smoke and the collapsing archways, our blades the only true sound in the symphony of destruction, swift. Final note that silences the enemy's war cries. I see it in their eyes. The invader, confusion, then terror. They expect a battle line, a shield wall to break against. They don't know how to fight ghosts. We are everywhere and nowhere, a flicker in their periphery, a cold breath on their neck, a sudden, sharp finality. We don't fight for land or for gold. We fight for an idea, for a promise of paradise. And that makes us untouchable in a way they can never comprehend. Every fallen enemy is a testament to our faith. Every silent takedown a prayer whispered in the language of steel. But the fire is impartial. It consumes stone and flesh with equal hunger. The screams are not just from the enemy tonight. I find him near the western bastion, where a siege engine has torn a wound in the stone as deep as the one in his side. It's Tariq. Tariq, who just this morning was laughing with me over a piece of flat, debating the finer points of celestial navigation. Now, he lies propped against the scorched wall, his breathing a shallow, ragged thing. The chaos of the battle seems to fade into a distant hum as I kneel beside him. His face, usually so animated, is pale in the flickering torchlight, beaded with sweat. I press my hand to his wound, a futile gesture against the life pouring out of him. My training screams at me to be practical, to assess, to move on. The battle rages, but my heart is anchored to this spot, to this brother. I start to speak, to offer words of comfort, of promises I know I can't keep. Hold on, Tariq. The healers, ... double quotes. He cuts me off, not with a word, but with a faint shake of his head. A slow, serene smile spreads across his lips. A smile so out of place in this inferno that it feels like a revelation. It's a smile of peace, of understanding. It is the same smile I've seen on the faces of acolytes when they finally grasp a difficult passage from the Master. It's not a smile of surrender. It's a smile of arrival. He reaches up, his hand weak, and grips my arm. His eyes, though clouded with pain, are incredibly clear. They hold a depth I've never seen before, a knowing that transcends this whirl of fire and blood. He pulls me closer, and his voice, when it calms, is not a cry of agony, but a whisper, as soft and profound as a prayer in the dead of night. Hassan, he breathes, the name a gentle breeze against the roar of the flames. Do not mourn. We do not die. I stare at him, confused. The evidence of death is all around us, in the air we breathe, in the wound beneath my hand. What does he mean? Is this the delirium of blood loss? But his gaze is steady, focused. He continues, his voice unwavering, carrying the weight of an eternal truth. We merely return to the shadow. He says it with such simple, absolute conviction. Return to the shadow. Not an end, a transition, a journey home. In that moment, something inside me shifts. The entire concept of death, the great and terrible fear that has haunted mankind since the beginning, begins to dissolve. For us, for the Fediain of Alamut, it is not a finality. It is a change of state. We emerge from the shadows to serve our purpose, and when our task is done, we recede back into them, unseen, unheard, but ever present. His grip on my arm loosens, and the light in his eyes, that brilliant, clear light of understanding, softens and then fades, like a candle flame gently snuffed out. His head lolls to the side. Tariq is gone, but he did not die. He returned. The words echo in the sudden, hollow silence of my mind. We do not die. We return to the shadow. I close his eyes, my hands steady now. The grief is there, a sharp, cold stone in my gut, but it is tempered by something new, or understanding. The fear of my own mortality, a fear I thought I had conquered through discipline, was merely buried. Tonight, it has been transformed. Death is no longer the enemy. It is not a failure or a loss. It is the final act of service, the ultimate expression of our devotion. It is a silent, mysterious beginning. I rise, leaving Tariq to the embrace of the shadows he has rejoined. My blade feels different in my hand, not just a tool of war, but an instrument of destiny. The battle still rages, the fires still burn, but I move through them now, not as a man fighting for his life, but as an agent of a cycle far older and more profound than this single night of violence. Each step is lighter, each movement more certain. The fear is gone, replaced by a quiet, unshakable purpose. The invaders will see a man, a warrior in the dark. They will not see the truth. They cannot understand that they are not fighting a mortal. They are fighting a shadow, and you cannot kill what has already embraced the darkness as its home. From this night forward, the meaning of death has changed for me forever. It is no longer an end to be feared, but a promise to be fulfilled, a silent, mysterious return to the source of all things. I am a Fede, and I do not die. Imagine, for a moment, the wind whispering through the jagged peaks of the Alaborz mountains in Persia. This is the home of Alamut, the eagle's nest, a fortress shrouded in legend and fear. And from this fortress, a shadow is cast across the medieval world. This is the story of the Hashashin, the order of assassins. But it's not the story you think you know. This is the tale of one man, a Fidoi, a devotee, whose entire life was forged in the crucible of absolute obedience. His name was Zain, and his daggers were extensions of his master's will. From the moment he was a boy, Zain was taught that the world was a chessboard, and he was a piece to be moved by the Grand Master of Alamut. He learned to silence his heart, to suppress his doubts, and to see his targets not as men, but as symbols of corruption, of tyranny, of everything the order stood against. He was a perfect weapon, honed by years of grueling training in espionage, combat, and deception. He could scale the highest walls, slip through the tightest guard, and deliver death as silently as a falling leaf. Mission after mission, from the bustling markets of Baghdad to the fortified palaces of the Seljuk emirs, Zain never failed. He was a phantom, a whisper of death, his loyalty to the old man of the mountain as unyielding as the stone of Alamut itself. His next target, the ruler of Aleppo, a man whose name was spoken with a mixture of fear and resentment in the caravanserais and back alleys of the Levant. The order was simple, the objective clear. Kill the tyrant, uphold the justice of the order. For Zayn, it was just another name on a scroll, another life to be extinguished for the greater good. He traveled for weeks, his identity melting away like a mirage in the desert sun. He became a merchant, a scholar, a guard with Teva mask. The mission required. He studied the city's rhythms, the patrol routes of the guards, the very architecture of the palace that housed his prey. He was patient, methodical, and utterly confident. This was his art, and he was a master. Aleppo was a vibrant city, a crossroads of cultures and commerce. But beneath its glittering surface, Zayn saw the tension. He listened to the whispers of the common folk in the souk, the hushed complaints of merchants burdened by taxes, the quiet prayers for deliverance. Everything he heard confirmed the verdict of Alamut. The ruler was a despot, a leech on his own people. The kill was justified. Zayn found a way into the palace, working as a simple servant in the sprawling kitchens, a ghost in plain sight. He learned the ruler's habits, his routines, the precise moment he would be most vulnerable. The night of the assassination was chosen. The moon was a sliver in the sky, and the palace was settling into a deep, unsuspecting slumber. With the silence of a cat, Zayn moved through the darkened corridors, his blades gleaming faintly in the moonlight that pierced through the latticed windows. He bypassed the sleeping guards, a phantom drifting through the heart of power. He reached the ruler's private chambers, the final door between him and his mission. He slipped the lock without a sound and stepped inside. The ruler was not asleep. He was sitting by a large window, gazing out at his silent city, a goblet of wine untouched beside him. He looked less like a tyrant and more like a man bearing an impossible weight. He was not old, but his face was etched with a profound weariness. The ruler turned, his eyes finding Zayn in the shadows. There was no fear in his gaze, only a deep, melancholic resignation. "So, the old man of the mountain has sent his regards," he said, his voice soft, devoid of the arrogance Zayn had expected. "I have been waiting for you." Zayn remained silent, his hand on his dagger, poised to strike. This was a test, a trick. But the ruler continued. "Do you know what I see when I look out at my city? I see a tinderbox, the Crusaders to the west, the Mongols stirring in the east, and a dozen ambitious emirs who would see Aleppo burn if it meant they could rule over the ashes. They call me a tyrant because I text them, because I enforce a hard peace. But it is a peace that holds." He stood and walked towards a large map spread across a table. "I despise this crown. I despise the choices it forces upon me. Every coin I take from a merchant is a coin that buys a sword to defend his family. Every man I conscript is a man who stands between his home and the chaos that surrounds us. They call me a tyrant," he repeated, a bitter smile on his lips. "But if I were to be the ruler they desire, weak, indecisive, and kind, Aleppo would be a ruin within a year. Tell me, assassin, is it tyranny to hold the floodgates shut, even if the strain makes your arms ache and your heart break?" Zayn's hand, for the first time in his life, faltered. The world, once a simple canvas of black and white, was now bleeding into 1,000 shades of gray. This man was no monster. He was a prisoner of his own throne. A man making impossible choices in an impossible world. In his eyes, Zayn saw not a tyrant, but a reflection of his own shackled existence, a man serving a cause he was no longer sure he understood. The symbol was gone, and only a man remained, a tired, lonely man trying to protect his people. To kill him would not be justice. It would be a crime. It would be to unleash the very chaos the Order claimed to fight. In that moment, Zayn made a choice. He sheathed his dagger. Without a word, he turned and melted back into the shadows from which he came, leaving the ruler of Aleppo standing alone in the moonlight. He had failed his mission, but for the first time, he felt he had done the right thing. He knew what this meant. To disobey the old man of the mountain was a sentence of death. There would be no forgiveness, no second chance. By sparing one man's life, he had forfeited his own. As he slipped out of the city and into the vast, unforgiving desert, he was no longer Zayn the Hashashin, the perfect weapon of Alamut. He was just a man, hunted by the very shadows he once commanded, a ghost running from his own past, searching for a dawn he might never see. His unfinished mission in Aleppo was, in truth, the beginning of a new one, a mission to understand a world far more complex than he had ever been taught, and to find a purpose not in the will of another, but within his own newly awakened heart. The shadow of Alamut is long, but even the darkest shadow is cast by a light, and now, for the first time, Zayn was running towards it. The dust of the desert clings to everything, a fine, gritty powder that finds its way into your clothes, your food, your very soul. For years, this was my world, a world of whispered orders, of blades drawn in silence, of missions executed with unwavering faith. I was a fede, one of the devoted, a living weapon of the Order of Assassins. My home was not a place of comfort, but a fortress carved from the very rock of the mountains. Our master, the old man of the mountain, Hassan Sabbah, was a figure of legend. Some called him a prophet, others a demon. To us, he was the embodiment of a truth so profound it could reshape the world. He taught us that nothing is true, everything is permitted. This wasn't a license for chaos, but a key to unlock the prison of conventional thought, to see the chains of dogma that bind mankind. We were the agents of this liberation, and our daggers were the instruments of its delivery. My latest mission had been in the heart of Seljuk power, a city glittering with gold and rotting with corruption. I moved like a phantom through its crowded bazaars and opulent palaces. My target was a vizier whose tyranny had bled the common folk dry. The task was simple, the execution flawless. As my blade found its mark, I felt not malice, but a sense of profound purpose, of rebalancing the scales of justice. I was the will of Alamut made manifest. The journey back was a long one, a solitary trek across sun-scorched plains and through winding mountain paths. Each step brought me closer to the eagle's nest, but also deeper into my own thoughts. The certainty that had guided my hand in the vizier's chambers began to feel less like solid ground and more like a carefully constructed bridge over a chasm of doubt. Had my action truly brought liberation, or had I simply created a vacuum for another tyrant to fill? Was I a liberator, or just another killer hiding behind a grand idea? Alamut, when it finally rose before me, was as imposing as ever. Its walls seemed to defy gravity, a testament to the will of those who built it. Inside, the familiar rhythm of training, study, and prayer was a comfort, yet it couldn't quiet the storm within me. I was granted an audience with the master himself, an honor reserved for those returning from significant missions. I found Hassan Sabbah in his library, surrounded by scrolls and books from every corner of the known world. He was old, his face a map of 1,000 secrets, but his eyes burned with an intensity that time had not dimmed. He didn't ask for a report of the mission. He already knew every detail. Instead, he looked at me, truly looked, as if he could see the turmoil warring within my soul. He spoke of the nature of belief, of the fine line between faith and fanaticism. He explained how our creed, "Nothing is true, everything is permitted," was not a destination, but a journey. It was the constant questioning, the dismantling of every truth society imposed upon us that led to true freedom. Certainty, he said, was a cage, a comfortable prison for the mind. His words were a balm, yet they did not entirely extinguish the fire of my unease. I gathered my courage and finally gave voice to the question that had haunted me for leagues. "Master," I began, my voice barely a whisper, "you speak of a faith that transcends doubt, but if our faith is so absolute, why does my heart still tremble before the act? Why does my hand shake, if only for a moment?" The old man of the mountain looked away, his gaze drifting towards a narrow window that offered a vertigo-inducing view of the valley below. The silence stretched, filled only by the whisper of the wind whistling through the fortress. I thought perhaps I had offended him, that my question was a sign of weakness, of failure. When he finally turned back to me, his expression was not one of disappointment, but of something akin to understanding, perhaps even compassion. He offered no complex philosophical treatise, no new creed to memorize. His answer was simple. 6 words that struck me with the force of a revelation. "Because you are still alive." In that moment, everything shifted. The doubt, the fear, the trembling in my heart wasn't a flaw in my faith. It was the very proof of my humanity. To be alive is to feel, to question, to tremble in the face of immense consequence. A rock feels no doubt. A sword has no fear, but a man, a living, breathing man, must grapple with these things. Our purpose wasn't to become unthinking instruments, but to be thinking, feeling beings who choose to act in accordance with a higher purpose, despite the fear, despite the doubt. The trembling wasn't a sign of weakness, but the cost of our freedom, the very essence of being permitted to choose our path. I left his presence not with the hollow certainty of a fanatic, but with a deeper, more resilient understanding. My faith was not a shield to hide behind, but a compass to guide me through the storms of doubt. I was a Fedi, a devoted one, but I was also a man, and in the shadow of Alamut. I finally understood that this was not a contradiction, but my greatest strength.